And we start with our biggest story of the past 2 days. Day 2 of the South Africa International Court of Justice application hearing concluded today, with Israel, of course, responding to South Africa's charge of genocide. SABC News international correspondent or international editor Sophie Mokoena is at The Hague and joins us now. Sophie, the Israeli legal team presented their rebuttal of South Africa's submissions, basically rubbishing any allegations against them, calling them distorted facts, and labeled the South African case the greatest hypocrisy. Give us the latest from that side.
Well, indeed, the legal team from Israel today presented its case. I think the case was based particularly on what transpired on the 7th of October 2023 in terms of where it all started in relation to the current military operation in Gaza. The team saying that many Israel citizens were killed, some were nationals from other countries, and therefore Israel had to respond and defend itself. And as long as you have Hamas operating in Gaza, you will continue to have these kinds of attacks. And also they were arguing that the case that was presented by South Africa yesterday doesn't hold water in relation to the genocide. They were saying that at all times the officials from Israel government have tried to make ordinary citizens aware when they were going to launch particular operations to ensure that people are able to move to secure places. But we saw that that didn't help, because still many people died. We're talking about more than 20,000 people who have died, mainly children and also women. But with me, I have the Minister of Justice and Correctional Service, Ronald Lamola, to speak to us about the observation in relation to what Israel said. Minister, Israel is saying South Africa is off the mark. There is no genocide in Gaza because they do communicate. Secondly, in defense of Israel, they will have to hunt Hamas because there's a chance that Hamas can strike back. Your case, you are saying there was a genocide and there is still genocide, and therefore the court must intervene. Do you think what you put forward yesterday is strong enough to convince the judges that there must be a provisional measure in relation to asking Israel to halt its operation?
Yes, indeed, Sophie. You will remember that yesterday we presented jurisprudence of the court to the effect that there is no justification for committing genocide. That is a decision of the court which is jurisprudential, which is authoritative even in this matter. So that defense has also been disputed by various ad hoc committees of the UN that found that the use of defense is no justification for the state of Israel's actions in Gaza. You can't maim and kill children. The children's numbers that have been killed during this period is the highest in any war situation. Killing of journalists, killing of doctors, and so forth. That can be seen as an act of self-defense or an act that is hunting Hamas. So that on its own, it falls flat in the context of the jurisprudence of the court in terms of what is a genocide.
They also argued that South Africa is kind of being unfair in terms of how they have been communicating with South African government, responding to what South Africa is saying or what South Africa said previously. In terms of the communication, did you communicate with Israel your grievances or your concerns before taking this matter here at The Hague? Not just statements, but a proper diplomatic channels, communication. Did you speak to them and did you respond to their communication?
Yes, as you will remember, the steps immediately after the court, I was with the DG of International Relations, Mr. Dango, who stated that indeed he has communicated with the State of Israel, including to state the reservations of the South African government with regards to the situation in Gaza. So that has also been addressed yesterday by our lawyers as we presented the matter when they were establishing the jurisdictional point and the issue of the dispute. So that has been sufficiently addressed and covered.
In terms of the intent, yesterday South Africa was saying that statements from different officials, including the Prime Minister of Israel, the head of government in Israel, we know that you also pointed out to what the head of state, the president, even though he doesn't have powers in terms of running of government, and also the Minister of Defense, what he said. And Israel is saying you can't use that as an argument. Those were just statements, just a rhetoric statement.
Yeah, that's shocking. And that's why at the steps we said it's astonishing. How can you ignore and state that as a fact, the statements of a prime minister, the statement of the Minister of Defense, the statement of the generals, even the songs that were clearly carrying out what the Prime Minister has said, the Amalek moment, clearly executing what they saw as policy. You can't ignore statements by a Prime Minister who have got executive powers, who has got authority, including the Minister of Defense, the generals, and also seeing the soldiers. So there is a clear relay effect and a chain of events emanating from the policy statement of the Prime Minister and the execution, as you will have seen from the video that we played in court yesterday. So there is no way you can dismiss that as a rhetorical or just political speak. That was showing the clear intent of the policy position of the State of Israel, which is to displace, which is to remove, and also to annihilate the entire population of Palestine out of Gaza.
Minister, finally, when are you expecting to receive perhaps a response from the ICJ?
Yeah, obviously we don't want to really preempt and second guess the court in terms of its processes, but in previous instances of this nature, the court was able to issue the outcome or the provisional indication or injunction within a period of 10 days. So that is our expectation. We are hopeful that the court also understands the agency on the basis of the continued siege and bombardment in Gaza.
In terms of processes, if the case is in favor of South Africa, you still have a hurdle in terms of implementation. Where to from there? But secondly, if you don't get what you want, where to?
Yeah, I think in terms of implementation, Sophie, you will have heard even today, the State of Israel, most of the things that they've said they've done were done last week. Some of them were done this week. Even the statements issued by the government, also the government of the USA, the Secretary of State, there is a sign that they are backtracking and they are beginning to understand the gravity of the papers that we have submitted. So the papers already had an impact with the work. So we believe that the issuing of the judgment will be more authoritative, will also help to ensure that there is protection of the people of Palestine. And
Minister, do you think this case, it is what compelled Israel to scale down its operations as they have announced, but you still get information that people are still dying in Gaza?
Yes, I mean, what they have said today in court, that is what they've said, that they've done in the past week or two. It is clear that it was done after the papers were received, including the communication of the language to be used and so forth. But the court judgment will be very authoritative, will be helpful, so that as we move to deal with the merits of the matter, it must enable a lasting solution in Gaza. As we are saying, as we speak now, the continued bombardment and siege is continuing. What is no longer clearly visible or seen is the rhetoric that they claim is rhetoric, which we believe it's a policy statement by the government to finish off Gaza.
And finally, what do you say to Africans who are currently suffering in Sudan, in some parts of the continent, in relation to abuse of human rights, and particularly in Sudan, where we are seeing a genocide unfolding, particularly in Darfur? What is South Africa doing? Back home, Africa is home.
Yeah, Sophie, you'll be aware that even the matter of Palestine has been with us for more than 20 years. South Africa has been campaigning for Palestine for more than 20 years. We came to court because of the situation escalating and the urgency of the matter, and with the fact that all diplomatic processes that have been undertaken by the UN has failed. So this organ of the UN becomes an element of last resort. So in all those areas that we are talking about, we are aware of our role as a country. We are playing a role to find a lasting solution in many parts of the African continent, in Sudan, South Sudan, in Darfur, as you said, in the DRC, and many parts of the African continent. So coming to this court, it's an element of last resort. There are still diplomatic processes and engagement that are being done by our international relations in all those areas in the African continent.
Thank you so much, Minister, for your time. That was the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Ronald Lamola, speaking to us here in The Hague.